Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome back to my channel Think Big Learn Smart, and I'm back with another video after a long time. So I hope you all are safe and in your homes. So let's start with our today's discussion. Today we are going to discuss about post COVID-19 international relations, geopolitical consequences of this pandemic, and future predictions, what the world will look like after this pandemic. So let's move on. Let's start with the introduction of our topic. So as we know that COVID-19 has wreaked havoc throughout the world, and regional problems and disagreements have been dwarfed by this huge health or economic crisis. Nature of international system has also been drastically impacted, and as we can see that in the aftermath of this pandemic situation, the world is not going to be the same as it was before. So this crisis has triggered a huge debate and a wave of predictions about what will the world will look like after the COVID-19 situation. So in this presentation we are going to talk about those predictions, and the scheme of our presentation will be like, we will first talk about a particular school of thought and what its main core theme is all about, what is its main gist. Then we will discuss the predictions that come or that derive from that concept. So let's move on. So the picture of international world post COVID-19, as I said, the scheme of our presentation will be like, we are going to talk about a particular school of thought, its main concept, and then we will draw a future predictions about the world from their perspective. What will be the world according to a certain school of thought and according to their perspective. So the first one school of thought is NEOREALISM, and we are going to see first its worldview, then what will be the prediction of the neorealist experts or the neorealist perspective. So let's move on. According to neorealism, international system is an anarchical or Hobbesian world of egoistic states, where the states are constantly competing with each other and try to make sure that they are ahead of their games. So the main overarching goal of all these states is to pursue their own survival, and they rely heavily on their own strength as best as they can. So the key dynamic in the system is shaped by the great powers, and globalization is basically a tool for those powerful states to ensure their power beyond their borders and to counterbalance their rivals to control less powerful states. So that's the main concept of neorealism, and that's the worldview or the perspective of neorealism. Now let's move on to the predictions of neorealism. What will be its predictions? So neorealism predictions. From the neorealist perspective, the key question is, how does the pandemic affect the relative power position of the key players? And as we know, the key players in the international system are the US and the China, and as we saw that this pandemic initially hit hard the Chinese economy, but what we are seeing now is that the pendulum is shifted towards the other end of the equation. The US death toll is rising, and the people infected there are also rising, the number of people, and it has become a vulnerable lot in the equation. So we can expect that the China will seize this opportunity to increase this influence on the international arena, and this is going to affect the US. And what the neorealism foresees is that it will try to increase its counterbalancing activities by imposing new protectionist measures. So as we know that these protectionist measures are already in place after the rise of Trump and after the US-China trade war start. As a result, we are likely going to see the negative effect of it on the global cooperation and on the international economic exchange. So that's the prediction of neorealism post COVID-19. Now, with the liberalism worldview, According to the liberalism international system, each state consists of myriad domestic actors, as we also know them in the international relations jargon as the non-state actors, and their different interests and ideas who are in constant struggle shape the foreign policy of a particular state. What foreign policy is, it is the behavior of the state towards its other nation state systems. So in the end, what happens is that one of them or the collusion of them ends up on top consequently, and the foreign policy is shaped by their preference, and it is not basically shaped by the entire society but only the dominant part of that society. So thus we can say that it is basically the group's preference, or the dominant group's preference in the system of each state, and it really explains the bilateral and multilateral outcomes of the relationships of different states. So let's move on with the predictions of liberalism point of view. Now, with the liberalism predictions, from the liberalist perspective, the key question is, how does this pandemic going to change or reinforce the configuration of states' preferences? Given the number of states and the variety of the world political system, it is very difficult to form a straightforward answer to this question. But uh, as we know from the influence of United States, we can predict a basic outline of what will be the world after COVID-19 according to the liberalism. So as we know, the more the pandemic turns it into a national emergency, the more it becomes the hour of executive branch, and the US president preferences will thus be left more and more unchecked by other political players. As we know, the election date is coming closer. We are going to see the more confrontation between the US and the China, and it is very hard to imagine the overlap of preferences of other countries, as the basic concept of liberalism said, that it is very difficult for the less powerful states to change the foreign policy, or to change the behavior of the system. So it is these dominant factors that are controlling the main system. So in general, the multilateral or global response for the crisis for globalization is very dim. So there are very dim chances for the cooperation between multiple states. Now, with the constructivism worldview, according to constructivism, international system and the interest of states are highly subjective. They are not objective facts. And Alexander Vendit's famous words, "What states make of it," summarizes this whole concept of constructivism very, very beautifully. And as a result, a state's identity and political culture play an important role in making sense of the international situation. A powerful country, if refrained from ruthless power politics and playing by the rules of cooperation, can change the system and its preferences. And most importantly, the constructivist point of view says that understandings and beliefs change over time. They are not subjective truths, and most importantly, they can change by interacting with other states. So what constructivist worldview says, that the interest of states changes with time, and they are highly subjective. So that's the main gist of this whole constructivist worldview. Constructivism predictions. So from the constructivist perspective, the key question will be, how does the pandemic change or reinforce the understanding and beliefs which state holds about globalization? What will be the new norm, or what will be the new idea that will be in the international world? So well, neorealism, for example, would find it very hard to predict why the states are cooperating and taking the infected patients from other states to the hospitals. Constructivism can easily explain that idea, and it will directly point out towards the norms of the system that are going on right now. And it also reminds us to pay attention to the important new paradigms and narratives that might change globalization in the long run, and that it might change the main perspective of the states towards globalization. So these are the constructivism predictions. Institutionalism worldview. According to institutionalism, globalization, or also known as complex interdependence, has profoundly transformed the nature of the whole international system. It is not longer a power struggle of states for survival, but resembles an economic competition of states for the market share, for increasing their influence. In such a world, deeper and denser economic ties, powerful incentives to cooperate and form permanent alliances, and institutions to enhance managed cooperation exist. So in this view, the international institutions or global governance is not basically a tool or for the powerful to exert control, but a reflection of greedy to cooperate. And as a form of deliberation or coordination, we see that G20 and the World Trade Organization provide important services to its member states, which help them maximize their welfare beyond the amount they would be able to achieve on their own. So that's the institutionalism worldview. Institutionalism predictions. From the institutionalist perspective, the key question is, how does the pandemic change states' incentives to cooperate? So from the institutionalist perspective, we should see that the rising number of international initiatives to pool expertise or share learn experiences, and we will also see that the states will combine and cooperate with each other for mitigating or the pressing long-term effects of that crisis. And the most obvious candidate that is going to gain influence in the post COVID-19 world is the World Health Organization, as this has become the major health crisis of the decade. By the same logic, we can also predict that there should be a declining of those institutions which have not lived up to the expectations of their creators, and that have not helped in this difficult situation in the international system. So these are the predictions of international institutionalism predictions. Last but not the least, conclusion. So the COVID-19 outbreak is an acute shock to the world economy and also to the process of globalization, and its impact can be far-reaching and extensive on the global arena. In the future, we are going to see that the localized production is going to get a huge boost, and the spread of goods and the free movement of goods, services, and capital beyond the borders will be greatly reduced. The large scale cross-border personal exchanges are also going to reduce, and we have to worry about the COVID-19 because it is like a butterfly, that it could cause hurricanes that are longer and stronger than can be currently predicted. So that was all from my today's presentation. So I hope you all got an idea about this COVID-19 and its impact on the international arena and international politics. So that was all. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.